Hello and welcome to Thrill of the Hill. My name's Alex Perry and this is the Farm Advisory Service podcast where we cover the topics and stories impacting the farmed upland environment. The Agri-Environment Climate Scheme is Scotland's leading mechanism to support nature-friendly farming and is returning for a 2026 funding round. The scheme is run for over a decade, and like any scheme with that lifespan, change is inevitable. To help us navigate the changes for this round, including eligibility criteria, spatial targeting and scoring, I'm joined by environmental consultant and lead for the Ecology Knowledge Network at SAC Consulting Limited, David Brown. David discusses the ins and outs of the funding round, pitfalls to avoid, and talks passionately about his involvement with the Farm Wildlife Walks initiative. Hello David, how are we doing?
Afternoon, Alec. Very well. Yourself?
Good. I'm good, thanks. It's good to have you
Excellent.
on the podcast.
Thank you very much.
I think this is the first time that you've been on Thrill of the Hill. Are you excited?
It is, and yes, very much.
Fantastic. David, for those listeners who maybe haven't heard from you before, do you want to give us a bit of a breakdown? Who is David Brown and what kind of work are you involved in?
Yes, I'm a conservation advisor for SAC Consulting. I'm based in the Grey Crook office in St Boswells, down in the southeast of Scotland, and my work involves quite a varied amount of different tasks. At the moment, very busy with biodiversity plans being done under the Farm Advisory Service banner. A strong part of the year is what we're about to talk about, the Agri-Environment Climate Scheme. I also help colleagues with advice on conservation issues. And I'm lucky enough, because I'm a bit of a specialist in the conservation side, I'm lucky enough that I managed to get to other offices within the organisation and go to other far-flung parts of Scotland to help colleagues out with various tasks, all based around conservation and wildlife management on farms and crofts.
And David, this is the Farm Advisory Service podcast, so I wanted to take a chance to highlight Farm Wildlife Walks while I had you on. Any reflections on Farm Wildlife Walks and how they've gone in the past? You and I have both been involved in the development and delivery of them.
I find the Farm Wildlife Walks a very rewarding part of the job, Alec. It's really great to get people out onto, obviously we're picking these farms because we're picking them for a reason. They're, best practice or best examples of what they have in the ground or the management that the owners are taking part in. It's a great way of encouraging other people to get them along. It's an opportunity. Sometimes something's going on over the March Dyke or the March Fence, and you're very interested in what's going on. And this concept of the Farm Wildlife Walks gives you the opportunity to go next door or go further down the road and get onto someone else's farm and see all the good work that's being done for wildlife and conservation. And there's so many good examples. I don't think we'll ever run out of examples of excellent wildlife work being done on farms across the country, because so many people are keen on it and involved in it and doing so much. And it's a great opportunity to spread the word, give examples of good practice. You can talk about these things, you can write about them as much as you want, but when you actually get on the ground and you see how good wild bird seed's been put in, how good margins are being managed, how well hedgerows can be managed, and speaking to the people that actually do it, and them being allowed to relate to others just exactly what they do, the machinations of what goes on. It's a fantastic opportunity for knowledge exchange and encouragement. It's a really good part of the job.
And David, let's not bury the lead here. We're here this afternoon to talk about the Agri-Environment Climate Scheme. It's been confirmed to continue on until around about 2030, and it forms a really key part of Scottish Government's policy towards biodiversity enhancement in Scotland and climate resilience. Can you give us a bit of background onto the Agri-Environment Climate Scheme? It's been running for 10 years now. Where are we in Scotland with regards to the scheme?
Yes, we're 10 years down the road, Alec. We now have a lot of experience of the way the scheme operates, and very much how it can operate on our clients' behalves when we're formulating schemes for them. and the type of options. We're well bedded in now. We know how some of these options will work in practice when they're on farm and they're being enacted, because obviously it's a big commitment. The scheme, it's a 5-year commitment. So when you're going into the scheme, you need to think ahead and know that your options that you're going to undertake are going to work for you and your farming or your crofting system. So we're well bedded in now. We know that it's going to go on until at least 2030. So the positive side of that is it's a stable platform we have to work with. As well, or better than I do, that the scheme's always having wee bits of changes here and there, some of which we're going to talk about in due course. But the basis of the scheme remains the same. The options remain very similar as they have in the past, and we kind of know what it's a known quantity now.
And do you want to just reflect on some of the schemes that you've been involved in the past, or some of the reflections that you've got on some of the management options and what's worked and what's maybe not worked?
Yes, a lot of the schemes that I've worked on quite a lot of schemes with moorland management involved in them, which have involved away wintering of stock, historically some stock reduction, um, summer hill grazing of cattle. They've been very popular options on hill farms. The summer hill grazing of cattle, I think, is a bit of a favourite one of mine. So many benefits to cattle grazing the uplands, for biodiversity, for agricultural purposes. They're the perfect management tool for a lot of the marginal grassland and the moorland areas that we have, and it's great to see schemes going ahead with that option being undertaken. Down in Byeground, there's a lot of interest always in the Wader grazed grassland options. Again, that's a heartening aspect for me as well. We know that waders are tremendously under pressure, populations of various wader species, and to see just how much ground is being managed on their behalf and trying to redress that is a great thing. I did manage to get some figures from Nature Scott. Nearly 49,000 hectares of Wader grazed grassland was being managed between 2015 and 2018, and that's a huge area of farmland and croftland across the country, and it's a massive undertaking, and it's got to be of great benefit to these species. And these are some of the things that have been done under the scheme. I think the scheme flies under the radar a wee bit in terms of the fact it's a bit unheralded. Some of the figures that I've seen for ground that's being managed, there's some tremendous figures in there, that people are managing for wildlife and conservation. And I think we should possibly celebrate's maybe not the correct word, but we should emphasise that a bit more. Just how much work is being done out there by farming and crofting businesses to help the environment and wildlife and conservation.
Absolutely. And the integration of cattle for long-term listeners of the podcast, this will be a consistent message that you guys are hearing, but it's really positive to hear that, summer hill grazing of cattle and the integration of cattle on small units is still, a real feature. And for the right businesses is absolutely of huge benefit conservation from a conservation perspective.
Yes, also from an agricultural perspective as well. I've got examples locally of farm businesses who, by going down the route of native breeds on hill land, they're now out wintering the stock as well, and they don't have the housing cost, they don't have the bedding cost, and they're still running efficient and profitable businesses. And at the same time, when out on the hill, their cattle are doing a fantastic job of grazing that vegetation, which breaks up dense, coarse vegetation. It allows the finer species to come in, and you get much more diverse sward. That more diverse sward, the knock-on effect of that is much more diverse insect life. Much more diverse insect life, you're going to get a much more diverse bird life, and so on and so on. The benefits are tremendous.
And David, you've talked about the scale of delivery that's happening across Scotland, and we've talked about the stability of having the scheme run for the next 5-year period. But like with every scheme that's developed, there will be changes that are made year on year. The scheme has to be dynamic and adaptable. I mean, what are some of the changes that farmers are going to have to think about going forward into this 2026 funding round, and what the future looks like?
Some of the most basic changes that people will see when they're looking at the scheme, I simply the web pages have been redesigned. They've been given a spruce up. So if you've been familiar with it, you'll maybe have a wee bit more digging to do. But it's been designed to make it a bit easier to navigate and clearer on the updates. There is information there specifically on the changes that have been enacted in this round. There are some changes to the eligibility this year. The spatial targeting for some of the options has been removed now. And spatial targeting, if you're interested in the scheme, there are some options which are only available in certain parts of Scotland. The idea and the rationale behind that is that for some types of management, it will only be particularly suitable and beneficial in a particular landscape environment. So some of the spatial options have been widened this year, so more people should hopefully get an opportunity to undertake some of the options. No point in running into the specifics of that on here, but if you're looking at the scheme and you're going onto the ARPID website, you just need to follow the directions to go into what they call the targeting tool. That targeting tool will take you to a spreadsheet, and you just need your location code to hand. And if you type in your location code to that targeting tool, it will then respond with a list of all the options that are available on your holding. And that really should be one of your first ports of call when you're considering going ahead with a scheme. Fundamentally, you need to know what options are going to be available on your holding. And for anyone who's interested, who's not been in the scheme before, is interested in that, that's a very worthwhile thing to do before undertaking the application yourself, or especially if you're going to be seeking the advice of an advisor to help you with it. It's good to be able to know in advance what you can and what you can't do.
And David, when you're talking about knowing in advance, the dates are always really important for the Agri-Environment Climate Scheme. There are a range of different deadlines depending on the application type that farmers might be interested this year. Do we want to just give a breakdown of what they are?
Yes, Alec, we've got a wee bit of a difference this year. The application window for EECS itself runs on a wee bit longer. It will open on the 23rd of February, so just a wee bit away, and it will run until the 20th of June. That's for the general scheme itself. The organic aspect of EECS, it will also open the 20th of 3rd of February, and it will run until the 31st of July. Another important aspect, the irrigation lagoons, which is a standalone application, again, 23rd of February till the 20th of June. Any combination or any sort of interpolation of these applications, the June deadline will be the force majeure. I think you would call it. That will be the 20th of June would be the deadline. And when we're talking about timings, Alec, just to emphasize, I think something that's quite important is the timeliness of thinking about making an application and making the application. They are quite involved. There's a lot of work involved. There's no getting away from that. Um, don't believe in it until the middle of June to be thinking about it. There just is not enough time to make an application then. They can be quite uh, complex to put together if you're going to put through a good scheme. And as I said earlier, the importance is making the scheme work for you and your business. So the more effort and time you can put into considering your options, doing things in advance, thinking things through, thinking things clearly, to allow yourself or you and your advisor to come up with a comprehensive and detailed plan that's going to suit you and your business for the next 5 years.
And David, we talked earlier about the availability of options this year. So I think from my understanding of the guidance, it looks like the arable management options have been extended across Scotland, which is great to see. It's always nice to have a bit of um, diversity in the options that we're undertaking. There are still some options, some capital items in particular, that aren't eligible in 2026. Do we want to just give a bit of an overview of what they are?
Yes, Alec, there's a few things remain suspended for 26 that were also taken out of the equation last year. The creation of species-rich grassland is no longer available. Heather restoration and follow-up millennia control is no longer available. Muir burn is still suspended, although heather cutting remains applicable in the scheme. And obviously, given recent changes, chemical bracken control is now no longer fundable under EECS.
So, David, we've talked about some of the capital items that aren't available, and obviously there is an expansion of the arable options this year, which is great. Um, can you just talk about the need for applications to be strong in terms of their ecological and policy rationale, and what we're trying to demonstrate in terms of value for money when we're putting together an application?
Yes, Alec, I think some of the things that we're learning as we go along, we talked about the longevity of the scheme now, that I think you and I have spoken about this separately as well, the move towards a more outcome-based idea for these schemes being effective. And I think we're seeing that the targeting of the options is very much policy wise, so that the funding for the scheme is the most bang for your buck, basically. Everybody's fully aware that no matter what you're doing in this day and age, money is tight. Budgets have to be very carefully considered. They have to be fought for tooth and nail. We're fortunate to have the budget we have, and we have to hope that make that go as far as we possibly can. And in a practical sense, um, you know, it's not rocket science to say if you've got a landscape where wading birds are not prevalent, there's not much value to anyone in doing prescriptions towards helping wading birds when they're absent from that landscape. So that's the rationale behind a lot of these policy decisions, and it's understandable in the fact that we have a limited budget and it has to go as far as it possibly can, and that's why some of those options that are not eligible, they are can be quite expensive options with difficult outcomes. So one of the reasons why they're not part of the scheme any longer.
And I think, David, part of that is mitigated by having the scoring criteria and managing for the highest quality applications that are possible, the greatest bang for your buck, if you like. Um, in terms of the scoring criteria moving forward, scoring's always been an important part of EECS. The scheme has always been competitive in some degree or another. But can you just talk about some of the scoring changes that we're seeing for 2026 and how that might impact people's applications this year?
Yes, the scoring's been tweaked a wee bit. Fundamentally, it's still very much the same principle that it operates on. It's a combination of what you've got and what you can do and what you're willing to do under the scheme. For example, this year there's a wee bit of a change to vulnerable priority species scoring, such as the wading birds. Um, for waders alone, there's an extra point available if you're able to meet certain criteria for stocking densities around the breeding season for the waders. Um, Black grouse have now been linked to the lowland heath management for vulnerable priority species scoring. There's an additional point now for water quality, where all of any new proposed water margins meet some of the enhanced width requirements. So when you're sitting looking at your scheme and you've got water margins that you're considering to manage under the scheme, a wee bit extra thought, taking a wee bit more of land out of production, putting it into the scheme may just tick the box on that front and get you an extra point. So it's very much when you're coming together with your plan, the scoring has to be at the forefront of your mind as to what you're going to do. It's not the be all and end all as we've seen in the last few years, but um, you know as well as I do, we don't have the crystal ball. We don't know scoring the scoring target in advance, and that's always an issue when we're trying to work plans up. We're currently at the moment we're waiting on to find out the scoring from last year, what's going to be successful, what's not. Last year the scores were revealed on, I think it was the 13th, 14th of February, and the indication for this year was it might be a wee bit later than that. So we're just pensively waiting to find out what our success rate was for last year. But it is a fundamental part of your thinking process for putting a scheme together is to assess what kind of scoring you will have, and it's because it is a points based scheme. Every scheme that is submitted, there is an element of risk to that, and it's very much down to the applicant. Based on the evidence that they have, the potential point scoring that they may have, is up to them to make the decision to go ahead and take the risk of making the application, because nothing is guaranteed.
And David, just one management option to highlight in particular, I suppose, maybe particularly relevant for listeners of Thrill of the Hill, stock control for the environmental management of designated sites, formerly stock disposal. Is there much to say about why the name change? Is that reflected in any eligibility criteria, or is it just trying to be more targeted, like you say?
Yes, Alec, the name change for that prescription has changed from its previous incarnation. It's now called Stock Control for the Environmental Management of Designated Sites. So it's possibly just helping to delineate this as a new option, which is now only available on a designated site, be that a triple SI, Site of Special Scientific Interest, Special Protection Area, or a Special Area of Conservation. So that is going to make it a wee bit more limited in where these things can be undertaken, but again, a bit more targeting and trying to get more value for money from that option. So that will be any sites and applications which will ultimately involve having to at least consult with Nature Scott on the management of these sites. And if I might mention at this time, as we mentioned Nature Scott, if anybody's putting in an application and you are going to be involved in a designated site for any of the prescriptions involved, and you need advice, counselling, help from Nature Scott anyway at all, is to get in touch with them at the earliest possible opportunity. Like everyone else, they're under pressure with time when these applications come in. So the more time that you can give them to assess your application or answer your query or your question, the better for everyone. So they're quite happy if you want to approach them before formal application's been made. If you want to get in touch with them just to ask speculatively, would this be acceptable? Or if we wanted to manage this site, how would you like us to go about it? What can we do? There's room for manoeuvre in there, and they'll want to be helpful and get the thing through. It's the other sites that they're specifically responsible for, so it's in everyone's interest if those sites can get promoted and be managed effectively for conservation.
And David, there are some options that are not expected to return this year. I've got a note here specifically for slurry storage. That's been hugely important for some of our dairy clients in the southwest of Scotland, and equally around the rest of the country. But am I right in thinking that slurry storage will not open for applications in 2026?
Yes, Alec, you're quite correct. The slurry storage option has been removed now from the scheme. It's been overtaken, should we say, by mandatory rules and regulations that have been introduced. So it's no longer really an option to undertake. It's the prevailing legislation has overtaken that and made it kind of obsolete. But if anyone wants advice on that aspect, I would suggest that they consult the Farm and Water Scotland website for advice and recommendations around slurry storage regulations and rules that are now in place.
And David, another thing that might be quite new for people who have historically been involved in the Agri-Environment Climate Scheme is the Fair Work First initiative. Can you just give us a bit of an update on that? What is Fair Work First, and why has it been incorporated into the Agri-Environment Climate Scheme?
It's government policy, Alec, and it was introduced with the contracts last year. It reflects the government's Fair Work First criteria. The details are all available online, and it's particularly relevant where contractors or employees are involved in the farm business. There are certain stipulations regarding their input to the way things are managed, the way contracts are run. All part of the bigger picture of work and welfare legislation, and just making sure that everybody's toeing the line in the bigger picture. It's expanding the remit of the scheme a wee bit, and just making it a much more of a holistic approach really to governance.
And I suppose particularly relevant to businesses where contractors or employees are involved. We just want to make sure that people have the opportunity to be heard within the business and that they're properly represented.
Yes, absolutely. That's what the thing states, that they want input and want to know that their input's being taken on board and heard to, and heard and listened to.
And David, thinking more about the actual application process itself, what are some of the practical pieces of advice that you would give to people who are maybe listening to this podcast and thinking, for the first time, I want to give the Agri-Environment Climate Scheme a go, or to returning applicants whose contracts are maybe coming to an end? What are some of the pitfalls that we should avoid going forward?
The main pitfall to avoid, Alec, is leaving things too late to make the decision. I can't stress enough how important it is to get your, not so much your mind made up, but make a decision early to whether you're going to look into this or not. There's a lot that a client can do if they're using the service as an advisor. There's a lot you can do yourself to help the process out by doing your own research and having a wee look first at the web page on that front as well. Everything nowadays is so web and web page dominated. Don't be relying on something that you maybe printed out last year or the year before, because the chances are that may have changed. We had a recent meeting where we had representatives from ARPID, and they were at pains to point that out, that they were so web based now. You really need to get the utmost up to date information from the website. It gets updated, the changes and versions are updated and noted. So you really should do everything online. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea. I, like a lot of other people, I much prefer to have a piece of paper in front of me to read things off. But we live in a world now where everything is constantly in a state of flux, and the website for EECS is the place to go to get the most up to date information, quite definitely.
And thinking about scoring, we have to think strategically, David. Is that a fair comment?
Yes, Alec, I think strategic is a particularly good word for that, given the intricacies of the scoring aspect of the scheme. But it can also engender a wee bit more thought and a wee bit more creativity as to how you're going to bring your application together, in terms of thinking about linkage of habitats, where you get points awarded for making a more holistic and cohesive scheme, where different habitats on your unit are going to be managed side by side or together, or there's a linkage between them. There's a tangible link on the ground. For example, a hedgerow running from a wetland to a woodland or a species-rich grassland. And just on that subject, one of the small changes that's been made this year: if you are eligible for hedgerow creation, the hedgerow must run between two other farmland habitats. It can't just be a standalone hedge. You may not have been putting a lot of standalone hedges out in the isolated on their own anyway, but it's just another reflection of trying to get more value for money out of the scheme and make a more cohesive scheme. And the more connectivity of these habitats, you and I know well that the more habitat linkage there is in a farm, by default, it's much better for the wildlife on that farm. So things are just evolving, and they're getting a wee bit more intricate and a wee bit more advanced, I think, and it all makes eminent sense when you're talking about the benefits to wildlife on the farm.
And David, it's maybe just worth highlighting this again because, like me, you will no doubt see this pop up on occasion. Applications do go in where farmers don't necessarily seek advice. They may feel comfortable doing their application themselves. Things can be missed, supporting documents can be missed. Please take care with that. But also, really do make sure that you are eligible for the management options that you're undertaking. And maybe one thing that we should flag is that participants of the scheme, new incoming businesses who are looking at their options, we really have to make sure that we're actually eligible for the options that we're participating in, and that, or that were proposing involvement in. You and I will see it pop up on occasion where a business proposes to undertake a management option that they're not actually eligible for, and that can result in the whole application being thrown out, which is a real shame.
Yes, Alec, it just requires a wee bit more a forethought and planning is what to your application. If you're going to propose to manage a field as species-rich grassland, quite simply, it has to be, in anyone's eyes, species-rich grassland. If it's going to be a habitat mosaic that you propose to manage, you have to put yourself in the looking through the eyes of someone who's coming to inspect it, be it from ARPID or Nature Scott. When they come onto the farm, are they going to be quite satisfied that that is a habitat mosaic, that is a piece of species rich grassland? So it's very important to make sure that what is on the ground is what you're saying it is on paper and you're putting forward. And again, we go back to this thing, value for money, and the purse strings are tight, and it's only going to go to fund habitats and management that's going to be worthwhile and of merit.
The threshold for habitat quality just keeps going up.
Yes, I think so. And on that point, if you're a returning applicant and you've had habitat in the past, um, just make sure that that habitat has maintained its condition before you try and put it in again. Don't take it for granted that because it's been in a scheme a few years ago and it's passed muster, then don't take it for granted that it's automatically going to get in this time, because things change, bars get raised. Don't make any assumptions on that front. Make sure the habitat's looked at before it's entered for the put forward for the scheme.
So, David, we've sat down with you now for a little while this afternoon. You've given us an overview of some of the changes that are coming to the Agri-Environment Climate Scheme. I think you and I would both say that we're excited for this next round. There are some really good proposals coming forward already. If I were to ask you to sum up how you're feeling about EECS 2026 in a couple of sentences, what would you say to our listeners?
Fundamentally, the fact that the scheme has been there for a while, it's still there, and it's still going to go on for a few years yet. You and I, we both share a common interest in conservation and wildlife on farms and in the wider environment. So the fact that the government is still funding a scheme whereby farmers and crofters can engage in and undertake wildlife friendly operations on farm to their benefit and the benefit of conservation is a great thing. And you and I both know there is so much interest out there. So many people want to do conservation work on farms. So the fact that the scheme is there, we must take that as a positive. We know that everything could always be perfected. Everything could be better if we had a crystal ball, etc. But the scheme is there. It's the principal delivery mechanism that we have from the government to undertake conservation work on farms and crofts, and it's open to everyone that wants to apply to it. That gives you opportunities. A well thought out scheme can make a difference to the environment and conservation in your farm. It can also make a difference to the income stream on the farm. The payments. Perhaps it could be better in some instances because the payments are still there to make options financially viable. So it's a positive on that front. And as you pointed out at the beginning, the continuity. We know what we're dealing with, and it's good that we've had clarity that it's going to go on for the next few years. So we basically know the route is mapped out for us and where we're going to go.
David, thanks very much for joining me this afternoon. I hope you've had a great time on your first episode of Thrill of the Hill. Always good to have a chat with you, and I think EECS is so important going into 2026. You've given us a lot to think about. Can I just ask, final question of the afternoon, how do people get in touch with you, David, if they've got any questions about anything that they've heard this afternoon?
Thanks very much, Alec. Yeah, my details, I will put them in the show notes, but I'm contactable at the SAC Consulting office at Greycrook at St Boswell's. And if there's anything that anybody wants to speak about based on what we've talked about today, then please feel free to get in touch on that number.
David Brown, on behalf of the Farm Advisory Service, thanks very much.
Thank you, Alec.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Thrill the Hill. If you've enjoyed this episode, why not try the Natural Capital podcast with Harry Fisher, or join Tiffany Stevenson over on Cropcast. Thrill the Hill was brought to you in association with the Scottish Government. Executive Producer Kerry Hammond, Producer Helen Cowie, and Editor Kieran Sim.
The Farm Advisory Service podcast. Audio advice on livestock, crops and soils, environment, rural business, and more. Brought to you in association with the Scottish Government.